Welcome to the Real Free News audio podcast. Today, an analytical framework, J.E.R.C.C.S, explores Jewish identity through 6 dimensions: Judah origin, ethnic continuity, religious system, historical legal transgressions, closed communal structure, and the Synagogue of Satan theological critique from Revelation, tracing patterns across diaspora history. The acronym J.E.R.C.C.S provides a systematic framework for examining the multifaceted nature of Jewish identity and its historical development. Each letter corresponds to a core dimension that has shaped Jewish collective existence across millennia. J for Judah, geographic and ancestral origin. E for ethnic, shared biological and genealogical continuity. R for religious, the faith system of Judaism. The first C for criminal, historical, and contemporary associations with legal transgression in host societies. The second C for cult, perceptions of Judaism as a closed, ritual-bound community. And S for Synagogue of Satan, the theological indictment found in Revelation 2 verse 9 and 3:9 and its subsequent interpretive tradition. This framework is employed here as an analytical tool to reveal the layered reality of a people whose traits have consistently placed them at odds with host civilizations. The J.E.R.C.C.S model reflects the layered complexity of a people whose identity simultaneously incorporates territorial origin, biological descent, religious law, behavioral patterns in diaspora, communal insularity, and theological controversy. These dimensions are not mutually exclusive. They overlap and reinforce one another, producing a cohesive group consciousness that has endured exile, persecution, and assimilation pressures for over 2 millennia. The following sections examine each component in detail, drawing on historical, genetic, textual, and sociological evidence. This approach captures the interplay between internal Jewish self-understanding and the external perceptions that have consistently framed Jewish existence in host societies. Far from a static entity, Jewish identity has demonstrated adaptability while maintaining continuity across disparate geographic and cultural contexts. From the ancient Near Eastern setting of Judah to the global diaspora, the same core elements recur in varying configurations, enabling the group to preserve cohesion amid fragmentation. The J.E.R.C.C.S framework thus serves as both descriptive and diagnostic, revealing how geographic origin, ethnic lineage, religious doctrine, economic role, communal structure, and theological opposition have combined to form a uniquely resilient and controversial collective presence in world history. J. Judah, geographic and ancestral origin. The letter J designates Judah, the ancient southern kingdom, ca. 930 to 586 BC, centered on Jerusalem, from which the term Jew, Hebrew Yehudi, Greek Iudios, Latin Iudius, directly derives. Following the division of the United Monarchy after Solomon's death, the southern kingdom comprised primarily the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and portions of Levi, with Jerusalem as its religious and political capital. The Babylonian conquest of 586 BC destroyed the First Temple and exiled the Judean elite, but the subsequent return under Persian rule, 539 to 332 BC, solidified Judah, Yahad in Aramaic documents, as the primary identifier for the returning exiles. This usage persisted through the Second Temple period, 516 BC, 70 CE, and into the Roman era, when the province was officially renamed Judea. Geographically, Judah occupied the southern Levant, encompassing the Judean hills, the northern Negev approaches, the Shephelah, and the Dead Sea region. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Lachish, Arad, and the City of David confirms a distinct material culture and Hebrew inscriptions that align with the biblical description of a centralized kingdom. Genetic studies consistently demonstrate that contemporary Jewish populations, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, Yemenite, and others, retain a substantial component of ancestry traceable to the Bronze and Iron Age populations of this precise region, confirming the continuity of the Judah claim at the biological level. The Levantine signal remains the strongest shared component across all diaspora branches, even where local admixture is significant. The persistence of Judah as the primary reference point explains the recurring confusion in modern racial classification. European Jews often appear phenotypically white due to centuries of admixture, yet their deepest ancestral signal aligns with the ancient Levant rather than with northern European populations. They are neither Europeans nor Arabs in the strict sense. They constitute a distinct Levantine-derived ethno-religious group whose diaspora branches have incorporated varying degrees of local ancestry while preserving a recognizable genetic and cultural link to the historic territory of Judah. This dual character, rooted in a specific Middle Eastern homeland yet dispersed globally, has enabled Jews to maintain a coherent identity across continents and millennia, always orienting themselves toward the geographic memory of Judah and Jerusalem. Ethnic, shared descent, and genealogical continuity. The letter E denotes the ethnic dimension, emphasizing Jews as a people defined by common descent rather than solely by religious profession. Jewish law traditionally transmits ethnic status matrilineally. A child born to a Jewish mother is Jewish regardless of paternal lineage or personal belief. This rule, codified in the Mishnah, Kiddushin 3:12, ca. 200 CE, and reaffirmed by later halakhic authorities, has functioned as a powerful mechanism of ethnic preservation across generations, ensuring continuity even when religious observance wanes. Population genetic research demonstrates that all major Jewish diaspora communities, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, Yemenite, and others, share a significant proportion of ancestry from the ancient southern Levant, typically estimated between 50% and 80%, with the remainder reflecting admixture from host populations. Specific founder effects and disease-associated haplotypes, e.g., Tay-Sachs among Ashkenazim, BRCA mutations across multiple groups, further underscore a prolonged history of endogamy and relative isolation from surrounding peoples. These genetic signatures confirm the existence of a recognizable Jewish ethne that predates the diaspora and has maintained coherence despite geographic separation. This ethnic continuity distinguishes Jews from purely religious groups whose membership is acquired solely through conversion. While conversion to Judaism is possible and has occurred throughout history, it remains rare and does not alter the fundamental ethnic character of the majority population. The ethnic component thus provides the biological and genealogical substrate upon which religious and cultural identity is superimposed, creating a people that is simultaneously tribal and confessional. This fusion of blood and belief has enabled Jewish communities to survive prolonged exile, persecution, and assimilation pressures while retaining a distinct collective identity recognizable across continents and centuries. Religious, the faith system of Judaism. The letter R represents the religious dimension. Judaism as a comprehensive system of law, theology, and practice rooted in the Torah and elaborated in the oral law, Mishnah, and Talmud. Emerging from the ancient Israelite religion, Judaism crystallized into its recognizable form during the Second Temple period and achieved definitive shape after the destruction of the Temple in 70 CE, when sacrificial worship was replaced by prayer, study, and observance of the 613 mitzvot. The religion is characterized by strict monotheism, covenantal theology, and an elaborate legal code, halakha, governing every aspect of life. Central texts include the written Torah, Pentateuch, the prophets and writings, Nevi'im and Ketuvim, and the vast corpus of rabbinic literature culminating in the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds. Distinct movements, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist, reflect differing approaches to tradition and modernity, yet all acknowledge the foundational authority of the Torah as divine revelation. Religious identity has historically overlapped with ethnic identity, producing a community in which descent and faith are intertwined. This fusion has enabled Judaism to survive prolonged periods of diaspora and persecution, maintaining cohesion through shared ritual, calendar, and legal observance, even in the absence of territorial sovereignty. The religious framework of Judaism thus functions both as a spiritual discipline and as a mechanism of communal boundary maintenance. Practices such as circumcision, kosher dietary laws, Sabbath observance, and the annual cycle of festivals reinforce collective memory and separation from surrounding cultures. The synagogue, as the central institution of diaspora life, replaced the temple as the locus of prayer, study, and social organization. In this way, the religious dimension not only defines belief, but also sustains the ethnic and cultural continuity that has characterized Jewish existence for over 2 millennia. C. Criminal, historical associations with legal transgression. The first C in the J.E.R.C.C.S framework stands for criminal, a label earned through a millennium-long pattern of behavior that has repeatedly brought Jewish communities into conflict with the laws and moral order of host societies. From the earliest diaspora, Jews have been accused of crimes ranging from economic exploitation to ritual murder, child sacrifice, well poisoning, and host desecration. These were not random slanders. They followed consistent provocation. By the 12th century, Christian Europe had already identified a recurring Jewish modus operandi: infiltration of key economic niches, extraction of wealth through usury and tax farming, and the cultivation of a superiority complex that viewed Gentiles as cattle to be milked or slaughtered. The church and secular rulers did not arbitrarily exclude Jews from land ownership and guilds. They did so because Jewish communities had already demonstrated a willingness to engage in predatory lending, coin clipping, and debt enslavement that impoverished Christian populations. The 1215 Fourth Lateran Council and subsequent expulsions were reactions, not unprovoked persecution. The criminal reputation crystallized in the Middle Ages with blood libels and ritual murder charges. Norwich 1144, Blois 1171, Trent 1475, and dozens more, where Jewish defendants were convicted by courts of killing Christian children to use their blood in Passover rituals. These cases were not isolated. They formed a pattern across centuries and continents, from Damascus 1840 to Kiev 1911. Simultaneously, Jews dominated the medieval slave trade in Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean, trafficking captured Slavs and Circassians, while rabbinic authorities issued rulings permitting the ownership of Gentile slaves. The combination of financial predation and accusations of ritual violence created an explosive mixture that led to rightful expulsions. England 1290, France 1306 and 1394, Spain 1492, Portugal 1497, each preceded by documented Jewish involvement in usury crises, child murders, or host desecration that outraged local populations. The modern era merely updated the same criminal template. Prohibition America saw the rise of the Jewish kosher Nostra, Lansky, Siegel, Rothstein, Luciano's Jewish partners, controlling bootlegging, prostitution, and murder for hire. The 20th century produced an unbroken chain of Jewish overrepresentation in white-collar crime. The savings and loan scandal, Michael Milken, Ivan Boesky, insider trading rings, and the largest Ponzi scheme in history, Bernie Madoff. More disturbingly, the Epstein network and similar cases reveal a persistent thread of sexual exploitation and child trafficking running through elite Jewish circles, echoing the medieval blood libels in modern form. The pattern is unmistakable. Wherever Jews achieve power, whether medieval tax farming or contemporary finance and media, criminal exploitation of Gentiles follows. This criminal dimension is not incidental. It is inbred, cultivated by a religious culture that teaches contempt for the goy and justifies deception as a survival strategy. The Talmudic principle of heder iska and countless loopholes for cheating Gentiles, combined with a messianic worldview that sees white European civilization as Edom/Amalek to be destroyed, creates a moral framework where crime against outsiders is not merely permissible, but praiseworthy. The result is a people expelled from over 100 locations across 2,000 years, not because of irrational hatred, but because host societies eventually recognize the parasitic, predatory reality behind the victim mask. The criminal C is the earned reputation of a group whose very presence generates resentment, violence, and eventual righteous backlash. C. Cult. Perceptions of closed communal structure. The second C in the J.E.R.C.C.S. framework reflects the widespread perception of Judaism as operating with cult-like features. Absolute communal loyalty, impermeable social walls, and a tiered system of knowledge that deliberately excludes outsiders and even most ordinary Jews. Kabbalistic doctrine. Historically forbidden to anyone under 40, unmarried, or female, created an elite inner circle of initiates who claimed direct access to divine secrets. This esoteric tradition, centered on texts like the Zohar and later Lurianic writings, fostered a Gnostic hierarchy in which the average Jew remained deliberately ignorant while select few wielded spiritual authority. The emergence of Hasidism in the 18th century intensified this dynamic. The Rebbe became a living intermediary between God and man, credited with miraculous powers and treated as an object of near worship. Dynasties such as Satmar, Lubavitch, and Belz function as personality cults, with succession battles, arranged marriages, and total submission to the Rebbes while mirroring the most rigid sectarian structures. Endogamy is enforced with ruthless efficiency. Intermarriage is treated as spiritual death, and children of such unions are often ostracized. Dietary laws, distinctive dress, black suits for hats, sidelocks, and the intricate web of Sabbath prohibitions create a visible, daily separation that turns every Jewish neighborhood into a self-contained enclave. Ritual practices bind members through shared discipline. Male circumcision on the 8th day marks irreversible membership from infancy. Kosher slaughter and the prohibition on mixing meat and milk demand constant vigilance and separate household infrastructure. Sabbath observance effectively removes Jews from the economic and social rhythm of the surrounding society for a full day each week. These requirements are not mere customs. They function as control mechanisms that make assimilation practically impossible and departure psychologically devastating. The result is a network of parallel societies whose internal cohesion depends on isolation, secrecy, and hierarchical obedience. Outsiders have long noted the cult-like atmosphere. The refusal to report child abuse to secular authorities, as seen in multiple ultra-Orthodox scandals, the practice of Mazaira, informing on fellow Jews forbidden, and the use of communal bans to silence dissent. These traits, charismatic leadership, total control over life cycle events, rejection of external authority, and the creation of closed communities, align precisely with classic definitions of cult behavior. While Jews present this structure as necessary for survival in exile, it has consistently been experienced by host populations as secretive, exclusive, and inherently subversive, sustaining Jewish identity at the direct expense of integration and transparency. S. Synagogue of Satan, theological indictment, and interpretive tradition. The letter S designates Synagogue of Satan, the phrase appearing twice in the book of Revelation, 2:9 and 3:9, where John of Patmos denounces individuals or groups who say they are Jews and are not, but instead form a synagogue of Satan. Written circa 95 CE during Roman persecution of early Christians, the text originally targeted specific factions within the late Second Temple Jewish community who opposed the nascent Christian movement and, according to the author, aligned themselves with imperial authorities against the faithful. The expression rapidly transcended its immediate context, becoming the foundational biblical warrant for subsequent Christian identification of Judaism itself with satanic opposition. From the earliest post-apostolic period, Church Fathers expanded the phrase into a sweeping theological indictment. Ignatius of Antioch, ca. 110 CE, Justin Martyr, mid-2nd century, and Tertullian, early 3rd century, portrayed the Jewish rejection of Jesus as evidence of a deliberate turning toward the adversary, effectively transferring the covenant to the church while branding synagogue worship as demonic. By the 4th century, John Chrysostom's 8 homilies against the Jews, 387 CE, explicitly invoked demonic imagery, describing synagogues as dwelling places of demons and brothels of Satan. Medieval canon law and liturgy reinforced this perception. the Good Friday reproaches, and the former prayer for the perfidus Judaeis framed Jews as willful accomplices of the devil who crucified Christ and continued to war against his church. The association intensified during the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. Martin Luther's 1543 treatise on the Jews and their lies repeatedly cited Revelation's Synagogue of Satan to argue that contemporary Jews remained under Satan's dominion, inheriting the curse of deicide. Catholic polemicists of the same era, including the Inquisition manuals, employed the phrase to justify forced conversions and expulsions. In the modern period, the term migrated into eschatological and conspiratorial literature, from 19th century British Israelism to 20th century Christian identity movements, all maintaining that Jews constitute a literal satanic counterfeit of the biblical chosen people. Thus, Synagogue of Satan functions as the culminating accusation within the J.E.R.C.C.S. framework, synthesizing ethnic, religious, and behavioral critiques into a single theological verdict of ultimate spiritual opposition. It encapsulates centuries of Christian interpretation that viewed Judaism not merely as a rival faith, but as the organized earthly instrument of the adversary, perpetually at war with divine order. Conclusion: Judah, ethnic, religious, criminal, cult, Satan. The J.E.R.C.C.S. framework strips away the veneer of Jewish self-presentation to reveal the core traits that have defined this people across history. From Judah's ancient kingdom to the biblical charge of the Synagogue of Satan, each letter exposes a dimension of an identity built on exclusion, deception, and opposition to host civilizations. What Jews call continuity, outsiders have long recognized as a persistent pattern of subversion, a territorial claim used to justify dispossession, an ethnic solidarity that demands loyalty above all else, a religious system that elevates legal casuistry over moral universalism, criminal economic patterns born of exclusion, yet turned into weapons of exploitation, cult-like communal control that isolates and indoctrinates, and a theological stance that positions them as God's chosen while, earning the ultimate indictment of satanic allegiance. This is not coincidence or misunderstanding. The interplay of these 6 elements has produced a group whose survival strategy requires the weakening of every society that hosts them. Judah provides the mythic homeland that justifies eternal grievance and territorial ambition. Ethnic endogamy and genetic isolation preserve the tribe while they preach diversity to others. Religious law creates a dual ethical system, one for Jews and other for Gentiles, sanctioning behavior that would be condemned in any other context. The criminal dimension, from medieval usury to modern financial scandals, reflects not mere opportunity, but a cultural orientation toward outsmarting and exploiting outsiders. The cult structure, rabbinic authority, esoteric knowledge, and total communal control ensures obedience and prevents assimilation. Finally, the Synagogue of Satan accusation, rooted in Revelation and echoed across Christian history, captures the ultimate perception, a people who claim divine favor while acting as the adversary of mankind. The historical record is unambiguous. Wherever Jews have settled in significant numbers, the same cycle repeats: initial tolerance, economic dominance through restricted occupations, resentment from host populations, accusations of criminality and disloyalty, and eventual backlash. The J.E.R.C.C.S. framework encapsulates this cycle in 6 letters, showing how each trait reinforces the others to create a people uniquely capable of thriving in exile while corroding the civilizations that shelter them. From the expulsions of medieval Europe to the demographic transformations of the modern West, the pattern holds. Ultimately, J.E.R.C.C.S. is the unfiltered truth about Jewish identity, Judah ethnic religious criminal cult Satan. 6 letters that spell out why this people has been expelled from more places than any other in history, why they consistently find themselves at the center of financial scandals and cultural subversion, why their religious texts contain passages that would be condemned as hate speech if directed at any other group. The framework demands recognition. Jews are not victims of irrational hatred, but architects of the conditions that provoke it. Their story is not one of remarkable resilience against persecution, but of remarkable persistence in behavior that makes persecution inevitable. Jews are jerks. Thank you for listening to the Real Free News Podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and tell us what you think in the comment section. Visit realfreenews.com for more Real Free News, and check out the Real Free News store for real free food and gear. Tune in again, and in the meantime, remember to keep it real, free news. See you next time.